Hi, I'm Lireal Moondagger. I'm the current Kingdom Regent of the Desert Winds, and we're a very widespread kingdom which can make travel very difficult and nearly impossible to do in the winter. So I decided to create a series of tutorials in order to bring the arts and sciences to you, no matter where you are. So I hope you enjoy watching and learn a little something too.
In this tutorial, we're going to explain how to make an omni-blade or octagonal blade short sword using shield foam. Reason we do this is, number one, we end up with a lot of scrap shield foam if you're cutting them out of planks. And also, Fun Noodle recently has become pretty much garbage for our purposes. Rumors are that's intentional on the part of the Fun Noodle company. But anyway, it's really hard to come by in the winter. Right now, we're in the dead of winter in Utah, and so we needed a better alternative to using noodle in the first place. So what I'm going to use today is 1.8 shield foam, polyethylene plank foam. It's 2-3 times better to use than the Fun Noodle brands that are out there, any other brands. It's a denser foam, it's a stiffer foam, and it lasts quite a bit longer. It's not as good as cross-link polyethylene, but for our purposes, since I end up with a bunch, this is what I'm making for the parks in my kingdom, and we're going to show you how to do that today. We'll start, it's going to go outside to some scrap that I have left over from cutting out shield foam, or shield planks, and we'll go from there. Thanks. Okay, so we've already cut out this big section here from our 1.8, our sheet of 1.8 pound polyethylene plank foam, and now I've got this excess amount, all this scrap here. I actually cut out a couple different shields. So we're gonna, instead of just throwing this away, we're gonna utilize that to make sword blades. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find a flat edge like I have here, and I'm going to measure along 24 inches, or actually 26 inches, because our blade lengths on a short swords are normally around 24. I'm going to add a couple extra inches, that way if I need to chop off the ends to square them up, I don't end up with less amount of foam. So we're going to measure that off, 26 inches, cut it down with a knife, and then I'm going to use that straight edge along that side on my bandsaw, and we're going to cut 2.5 inch strips. Each of those strips will then get a router and then glued together and then beveled to turn into an octagonal Omniblade. So let's do that part next. So now we have our fry that's cut 2.5 inches wide. And we set up our router table with a 1/2 inch bit, rounded bit, I don't remember what it's called, set right to the depth at 1/2 inch. We're going to run this, it's centered so that it's going to cut a trough like this one here, right down through all of these in the middle, and then we can marry them up. So give me just a second. And don't forget, if you are going to be using power tools, safety gear. So I've got a foot pedal on my router so that I can control it. Router channel, nice and thin, just big enough that once we glue them together, they'll be able to slide a core through. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all the different ones I do. They'll marry. Okay, so now we've got our 26 inch long pieces, and again the 26 is made so that you can trim off a little bit depending upon the length of your short sword. We've routed that channel down the middle on each one. We're going to use DAP brand weldwood contact cement. I like to use a little applicator. I use with a little piece of leather and an old handle. Just going to get a little bit on here, and we're going to dap that edge on either side. We're not going to try to put down any in the trough because, again, we're basically making noodle. out of this heavier weight shield foam. Polyethylene shield foam. This is probably a 1.8 to 2 pound piece that I have here. And with DAP, you want to make sure that you get coverage everywhere you want it joining, but you don't want excess amounts of DAP. If you put too much DAP, your joint's actually going to be weaker, because you're going to have a buildup of the glue that will dry and crystallize or whatnot. And then when it hits, it's going to be thick, and that glue will crack and it'll pop and peel away. So, like I'm using the trowel here, we're scraping it so that there's just enough that it covers the surface. The same thing on the other side. And then follow the directions on the DAP can as far as letting it dry. You want to let it dry to where it gets a little bit tacky, almost completely dry to the touch. If you don't have any glue on your hands, and you should be able to not feel it wet when you pull away from it. Again, I'm using gloves because I don't like to get DAP all over my hands. You can kind of look at it how it works. Drying in warm temperatures normally takes 7 to 8 minutes, depending upon whether or not you have it in direct sunlight or not. Right now I'm in a very cold front in the middle of winter, so I'm going to speed up that process and quick set it using a heat gun. Okay, so here I've got my heat gun. I'm just going to go over the top of it, and I can see it kind of crinkle up and dry. You can also tell that that trough right down the middle, all the excess little foam that was stuck in there is going to melt with the heat of this. You don't want to put it on too hard or too long, because it'll melt that foam right away. So you're just going to go right over the top of it. It's quick setting that DAP. And then I'm going to take it over, line it up on the edges. And now we put a little bit of pressure on it. And now you've got a box. This is 2.5 inches wide with the core in the middle. There's an inch of foam on either side here. We actually have more foam here because the pieces are more than just 1.5 inches. They're closer to 2 inch. So I'm going to come back on my bandsaw and trim the excess of that off, and then we'll be putting it onto 45-degree angles on each corner to turn it into an octagonal blade. Okay, so I've set up my jig right here because I'm going to be just taking off an extra 1/4 inch off of each side. Now we have a 2.5 by 2.5 box with the hole right down through the center. We need to now knock off the corners, so we're going to adjust the jig, move the platform on the bandsaw to a 45-degree angle, and I've got to determine how far up to put that 45-degree angle to cut the edge off. And I'm going to use this smaller piece to slide in here. What? Right about there. We have an octagonal blade, and we can slide over the top. You can go from here different ways to build your tips to make them last out longer, especially since this is foam that's just slightly better than Fun Noodle. You still want to build a core reserve. So being that this hole is so small, you can't really build a core reserve into it as the way it is. So I'm going to set up and do a countersunk hole so I can fit a core reserve in there, and also countersink the opposite side so it'll slide over the handle, and I'll show you what you mean in the next segment. Okay, so I'm coming over my drill press. I've got a 3/4 inch bit here. I'm going to come up right up the center and countersink this hole out. Only dropping in slightly, that way I can build the core reserve and it'll hold in there. On the opposite side, I'm going to go as deep as I can. That way when I slide this down over a gall shaft, it'll go low enough that the tip sticks out. In fact, hand me one of those gall shafts over there, would you? We'll move the camera around over to here. There's a couple on there. Okay, so here we have a gall shaft that has been cut down to 34.5 inches. I'm going to take the tip that's been squared off up on top that only has about 1.5 inches countersunk. Slide from the opposite side. Push all the way down. And now I've got the piece sticking out here. This is where we will then build the core reserve using the team method for the foam. We'll do that next.
Countersunk the one side, but not both
Oh,
sides.
the reason that the back side is countersunk so deep is if you're using a gall shaft that has a grip, as you pull it down, freshly dapped foam sometimes spreads apart because you've got now this big wedge pushing in there. So we've countersunk that section so that when the core slides all the way in, and you've got enough room to build your core before sliding it back up, it doesn't split the foam down. And then this part of the sword, once you got it fully made, is rarely hit. Most people hit with the top, 6 to 10 inches of their sword most of the time, and the part right up near the handle and the grip rarely get hit. So countersinking that out is no big deal, especially since we're going to torque wrap it down in the next step. Alright, so at this point we've made our octagonal blade out of the shield foam. We've routed, we've countersunk the top piece about 1.5 knuckles deep on the top. I put it on the bandsaw and made sure that the top was nice and flush. The bottom side, you can see I haven't flushed that out. I'm not too worried about that because we're gonna bevel it here in a minute. This one also is countersunk as deep as that blade was, about that deep. Move my gloves at this point. So now we have our sword core. I've trimmed this to 34.5 inches. Cutting it on the bandsaw leaves a nice sharp edge on this edge. So what you want to do is normally take it to the concrete and grind it down like this on the concrete. I'm going to use my little grindstone here. Oh yeah, let's see, let's turn this around. So this is my my granite slab for leather working, but I can use that as well. I'm just rolling it a little bit as I do that, and that takes that nice sharp edge off. Now the next thing we want to do is we're going to take and we're going to slide. Turn that back around. We're going to slide the foam onto the shaft. So we're going to push it all the way down until we've got a good 3 or 4 inches left on the other side. Now we're going to cut some strips of foam. You can use blue foam. In this case I have a bunch of microcell 2-pound, which is really nice steady stuff. I've cut it about 3/4 inches wide. I'm going to do a little bit of trimming, and I'll show you how to do that over here. Okay, so I'm going to take this foam, I'm going to bevel the edge at kind of about a 45-degree angle-ish. So I don't know if you can see that. Then I'm going to come back down about 3 inches, and bevel the opposite way. And then I'm going to make a second piece that's just slightly longer than that. So I have these 2 pieces. Now take your strapping tape, cut off the end that I roll over. Cut some strips about 5 to 6 inches long, 2 of those, and then 2 that are 8 or so inches long. I'm going to take and I'm going to rotate or wrap the smaller piece over the tip like this, not compressing down, just wrapping it around. Start with one of the smaller pieces. Go around so that it hooks on, fold it over all the way around, and that just holds it on to the tip. Take the other piece, we're going to turn it into a T pattern, and this is what's called a core reserve. This makes sure that even after your foam on your blade breaks down on the tip, you still have foam on that very, very tip, so it doesn't punch through and hurt someone. Next, take the longer pieces, they went straight down, and bring it all the way down onto the core. Should overlap the core by an inch, inch and a half. And you're going to go the opposite direction. Now we have this big old Mondo tip. Now you're thinking, now how is this supposed to go into that? Well, you use your strapping tape, start down on the core, start rotating, and as you get closer, it starts cinching it down. And then roll up. I normally leave the last ½ inch, quarter of an inch, so it's a little poopy there. And then come back down again. Onto the shaft. Now with this strapping tape, the strapping tape is not going to break no matter what the heck you do to it. So long as you've gotten a good inch, inch and a half torque wrapped down onto the shaft, this won't come off. If you ever need to take this off, you'll end up having to cut it off because that strapping tape's going to give it there. You know, it's now got compressed foam. It's just big enough when we slide the tip, goes into that countersunk hole really nice and snug, nice and tight. We bring it in until it's flush. Then we're going to take some of those caps that we cut out earlier here, the white MC, again you could use blue foam on this, and we're going to lay it here. You can see this white cap is 2.5 by itself, so this Omniblade that I did is just slightly bigger than that, so that's good, so we know that we're just over the top. Next we're going to take the clear packaging tape, and I am just going to put one quick spot to hold that cap in place for the time being. Now I want to flip the blade over and see how we've got the unedged or the untrimmed side here. We want to torque wrap this down because this section is, this torque is what's going to hold the whole blade to the core, being that we're not gluing the foam down onto the core, and there's a reason for that. I'll go into that later. Number one, it's a heck of a lot easier to replace blades. Number two, when you glue your foam, your Omniblade to its core, every time you're pressing this direction with the core, it's also pulling away from the top section, the opposite section. And so you're compressing the foam this direction on a hit, but you're also tearing the foam on the opposite side of the blade away. So with it just compressing, it's not tearing the top as much. I'm sure there's a little bit of tearing. I'm going to readjust this so that you can see the torque wrap. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to torque wrap this section down. As I go across, there's a little bit of an art to it. Use your thumb right against the foam as you're compressing down. If you do it out here, you're going to snap your tape. If you do it right on the foam itself, as you turn, it starts spiraling down. Come down onto your core just a couple of inches, and then reverse it back up. This torque wrap gives enough force to keep the whole blade from sliding off this direction, so long as you come up the blade, or the sword core onto the handle, just enough. Next, we want to, taking the clear packaging tape, start down where the torque wrap was, and very carefully slide it up. You want to get the least amount of wrinkles as possible and go all the way up to the top without compressing the tip or the sides. We definitely don't want to compress that tip down, because if it compresses, then it won't pass the 2.5-inch ring rule. So bringing it back down, flatten that out. Now we're going to overlap that layer just a bit. Now the reason we're doing this is this thin tape will actually help the life of the sword, or of the blade, be extended, because it'll keep all those little tears in the foam that might happen when you hit onto someone's armor or whatnot from happening as bad. And by overlapping 3 times and being close attention to where you're coming on the opposite side, you can do it in just 3 overlaps. Now, you haven't had to use tape on this top piece, being that we don't have a huge amount of foam sticking out the side. It's not going to rip off later. We now have basically 1.5 inches foam on the tip. At this point, now I'm not torquing this as I go around. I'm just wrapping this, and what this does is it helps keep the foam from expanding every time you hit. It'll make your tip last longer. I normally come down with this spiral wrap about 3-4 inches. And then I'll throw one more straight wrap foam, or tape, down here at the bottom. Now the blade is done. Now we have, this is 4-pound microcell. I use it for the cones on my arrow tips, as well as pommels. I'm going to show you how I cut them out. This is a 2.5-inch bore bit for door handles and whatnot. The inside diameter, or what it cuts out, is exactly 2.5 inches in diameter. It has a center bit that drills a hole all the way straight down, so you know where the center is. I start it up because I don't have a big enough clutch on this. I raise it manually. And it's not deep enough right here to go all the way through, so when I turn it over to the other side, I have a starter hole that I can guide it straight up so that I make sure it stays straight. and then it cuts through. Then I generally just grab it right there, and I have a cone of 4 pound. So I've done that. I'm going to do that for the rest of these that I've put out. Very careful if you're doing it the way that I'm doing, because it does have teeth that it's cutting. I'm making sure to just trim off the excess. I don't know if you can see that, where that line is, so that there's not a ridge showing. Now I've got that quarter inch, and I can then put this on my bandsaw and bevel off the outside edge. Okay, so I beveled my bandsaw. It's sitting at about 35 degrees, or is that 35 or 25? Sorry, 25 degrees. I have my piece with the 1-inch hole in it, and if you can see right here, because the saw that cut it all out at the end left that nice little ridge right here. I use that as a guide as I'm beveling the corner. Now, where are we at? Okay, there. Now we've got a nice beveled cone for pommel to put on. We cut out those pommels earlier. Let's slide that right onto the end. And then this is some of the floor mat 2 pound MC foam. I like to put it rough side flat, and then just bring the clear tape down. Onto the handle, and then I'm going to do a spiral wrap. Because even though this is 4 pound MC that I'm using, because we've cut a bevel into it and have a 1-inch hole, or 1-inch hole, it will allow me to torque wrap and cinch that handle down nice and snug. Oop, see there with snap it. And there you have the sword. Okay, so I finished my sword cover. Sock method, you fold a piece of fabric over, sew it up all the way around. I like to use the serger to serge the edge, kind of holds it up together and helps it. We're going to turn that inside out and slide it onto our sword blade next. So turn the sock inside or right side out. We're just going to slide it onto our top. This one's dog-earing just a little bit, but no biggie. Now, normally I use grip tape on my pommels, but this time, to help differentiate this sword from a different set of swords, I'm going to add a cloth pommel. So I'm doing basically the same thing I did with the weapon cover. I'm just making a smaller weapon cover, sock type, to go over the end. Since this is a pommel cover, I'm not even going to worry about serging the edge. Turn that inside out, slide it on the pommel, and then we can use grip tape on the handle. So here I've started the grip tape. My cover was just a slight bit short. I actually made this cover for a different weapon, and then this one's about 2 inches longer. But it's not going to worry. I'm going to continue that all the way down and cinch up on the pommel, right up to the base of the pommel, about right here. And there we have it, completed sword using the 1.8 pound shield foam as the blade.